Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflect the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. And I want to start with a welcome. A welcome to Season 2. Let that land for a second. Season 2, 52 episodes in, 1 full year of showing up every Monday for you, walking through frameworks, sharing research, being vulnerable about what leadership looks like from the inside. And here we are on the other side of that milestone, starting something new. You know, I spent a long time thinking about what was going to be the right topic for the beginning of this new season. Now, I could have gone with vision, strategy, momentum. All of those are really great topics. And some of those really rally a good deal of energy. But if I'm being really honest, none of that actually felt right. Because the truth is, this second season exists because I moved through some real failures. And you know what? That actually felt like the thing worth saying first. So today we're going to talk about failure. And I don't want to talk about the concept of failure, not some polished version of learning moments. I want to talk about the real thing, the kind that actually wakes you up at 3 a.m., the kind that makes you replay conversations in your head, the kind that makes you question in the most private corners of your thinking whether or not you're actually good at this. So, why don't we start there? I like to think that failure comes in different sizes, and we treat them very different as humans. There are obviously the very large ones: losing a client, losing a deal you were certain that you would win, not getting that promotion, the bonus that never came that should have, being let go from a company, or spending months in a hiring process at a new organization only to get the call that ends with, well, we've decided to go in another direction. Those are the ones that kind of stop you cold. And they can take the air out of a room that is just you. But of course, there are the smaller failures. The memo you submitted to your supervisor, the one you were genuinely proud of, and the response you got was tepid at best. The comment someone made about how you handled a client call, the presentation that you built for months, researched at 6 a.m. in your bathroom, and when you delivered it, the room just sat there. Now, here's what I want you to notice. Most people carry a wide psychological gap between those two categories. The big failures feel existential at best, and the smaller ones feel personal in a different way. They sting, they irritate, and they can send us looking for someone else to carry the blame. But look, underneath both, something similar is happening, and that is what this episode is really about. We've spoken before on the GSL about Brene Brown. She spent decades studying shame versus guilt. And I've referenced her work before in episode 45 when we talked about the self-protective mechanisms that kick in under pressure. Now, her core distinction is one of the most useful ideas in leadership psychology because guilt says, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. When we suffer a significant failure, the pull towards shame is almost automatic because we do not just say, I lost that client. We say, I must not be good at this. We do not just say, I did not get the promotion. We say, maybe I was never as capable as I believed. And what I want you to take away with here is that is shame at work, and it does something very, very specific to a leader. It narrows your aperture. It makes you hesitate before sending the next proposal. It makes you pull your punch in the next presentation because part of you is still bracing for the reaction you got the last time. In the name of self-protection, you start shrinking. And shrinking over time looks exactly like stalling. The small failures do something different but equally damaging. They create defensiveness. They put you on guard. And defensiveness, given enough time, calcifies into a rigidity that shuts out the feedback that, frankly, you need in order to grow as a leader. But in both cases, the failure stops being information and starts being an identity. And that is the trap I want to name. Now, from a neuroscience standpoint, this is not a character flaw. It is actually a feature of a system that is designed for a very, very different kind of threat. When we experience failure, cortisol spikes. Your heart rate increases, and the prefrontal cortex responsible for rational thought and strategic perspective gets overridden. And it's running an old program. Threat detected, protect yourself. That stress response has not evolved at the pace of your professional environment. Your brain does not distinguish between a predator and a bad performance review. It actually treats them with the same urgency, the same physiological weight. And then there's the negativity bias. When you have an exceptional day with one thing that goes sideways, what do you come home carrying? It's not the exceptional day. You carry the one thing that did not go right. What I want to reinforce to you is that this is not a weakness. It is biology. Now, understanding that gives you something to push back against, even if it does not make the sting go away. So, what does it look like to engage with failure differently in real time, not just in retrospect when the distance makes everything so much cleaner? Well, it starts with a reframe that is genuinely hard to hold in the moment, but becomes more natural with practice. I want to really double down on this point for all of you. Failure is not a verdict. It may be a data point, though. The memo that landed the wrong way with your supervisor tells you something about how your supervisor processes information, what they prioritize, what gaps exist in how you framed your ideas. The deal you lost tells you something about the client's decision criteria, your positioning, or something just the competitive landscape on that particular day may have evoked. The promotion that went to someone else tells you that something about what the organization values right now at this particular moment in time, and whether that aligns with where you are trying to go. None of that is pleasant to sit with. But it is a useful data point if you're willing to look at it without letting shame do the interpretation for you. Wisdom comes from strength of your failures. I want to say that again because it's really important. Wisdom comes from the strength of your failures. And I truly believe that to my core. Not as a comfort or a consolation to make myself feel better, as a structural truth about how growth works. You cannot borrow that wisdom from someone else's losses. You just can't. You have to earn that on your own. And the question is not whether you will eventually look back on your failures with perspective. The question is how quickly you can find a version of that perspective while you are still inside of the experience. That is a skill, and it is trainable. And it is, I would argue, one of the most consequential skills that a leader can develop. Look, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on my personal story. I have left companies on my own initiative, certain the opportunity on the other side was going to be better, only to find out that I was sold a very bad bill of goods, and what I was running toward had its own set of problems that were much worse than what I was leaving. I have pursued promotions that I have not received. I have lost deals I was more than certain I was going to win, And I've hosted events that I thought were going to be a standing room only, where the room was actually half empty. I have been passed over for an award in my industry that most people around me, and I will not pretend otherwise, expected I would receive. Each of those hurt. Each of them, in the moment, felt like evidence of something I did not want to be evidence of. What I know now, looking back, is that each of those moments contained a pivot for me, and a very important pivot. Now, to be clear, it wasn't a dramatic one. It was actually a small adjustment in direction that compounded over time into the path that I am on now. I could not see the shape of it from inside the experience. But the reality is that it was there. And here's what I keep coming back to. We are, at every moment, the accumulation of every choice we have made and every experience that we have had. All of it, including the losses. There is no version of you that gets to keep the wins and discard the rest. The losses are load-bearing. They are part of the structure. So here's the operational frame I want to leave you with. If you know what your North Star is, that is, the direction that you are moving in, the values you are building your leadership around, the kind of leader and person you are committed to becoming, then failure becomes navigable. Not painless, navigable. When you know where you are going, any given failure becomes a question. Does this change my direction, or does it change my route? Most of the time, if you are being clear-eyed about it, the direction is still intact, only the route change. The goal is to stay open, to say yes to what moves you forward, no to what distracts you, and receptive to whatever comes, including the things that do not go as you had planned or as you had wished, and frankly, especially those. Celebrating your wins feels something very, very real, and it matters. It really does. But so does this. Learning to move through failure with your identity intact, your direction clear, and your capacity for growth protected. That actually does feel something too. Something that compounds in ways the wins alone cannot. I want to be clear about something else. Failure is not actually the opposite of success. It is part of the cost of living an actual life. For those of us who decided to choose leadership, it is part of the cost of doing this work with any real depth at all. Because remember, leadership, it isn't about perfection. It is about progress. Take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.